And your test on Friday will also include everything we cover today. Okay? We're going to cover tissues today, which you are doing in lab. All right, so this will serve you to do well in your lab exam, which comes up in a few days or next week or whatever it is. All right, and it will also help you do well on the exam on Friday. So you will have a few questions on your exam on Friday. Okay? Okay. With that, I gave this little note sheet chart that you should here, pass it around, that you can use to follow along. People who don't come to class today, they're really in trouble. Anyway, hi Jason. So when we cover tissues today, we're really looking at the animal as a whole. All right, we're going to be looking at form and function. All right, this is sort of an introduction to anatomy and physiology. Anatomy, in terms of human and animal, is looking at the form of the animal. All right? Okay? And we know from structure and function throughout biology is directly related. All right? So anatomy being looking at the form of an animal or organism, physiology is looking at the function. Okay? And remember that they are very closely related, all right, throughout the organism itself. So, what's the overall goal? Thank you, Kat. All right. The overall goal for an organism is to maintain some type of normal environment. All right, internally. Remember that now we're talking about multicellular organisms. Okay? Multicellular organisms, so that cells have to interact with one another. They interact with one another in order to maintain some type of normalcy. Okay? With that, there's also, because of the multicellular nature of organisms, there is, take a piece of it. All right, there is an ability for cells to specialize, to do certain things. Okay? And evidence being neurons. Right? Neurons and muscle cells are unique to animals. Okay? They can transmit messages in the case of neurons. They can, in the case of muscles, they can respond to some type of impulse message, right? And they can contract. All right? So specialization, with that, groups of cells can work together to do things, right? And that's, so now we move up the hierarchy in terms of organization. All right? So we go from cells, because cells can specialize, they can group together and perform certain functions. We know that neurons do a certain function different than skin cells. Okay? All right? So cells can be organized in groups of similar structure and function to form tissues. Okay? So tissues, we will look at, are groups of cells with a similar structure or a similar function. Okay? So we'll talk about 4 types of tissues today: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. All right? Groups of tissues, those epithelial, connective, muscle, nervous tissues, can be grouped together into what is an organ. Okay? An organ is something that provides a specific type of function in the body. Example, the brain. Grouping of neurons, blood vessels, okay? There's no muscle in the brain, but example, all right? Neurons and blood vessels that do a certain type of function controls organization throughout the body, okay? Another example. Give me another example of an organ. All right, the heart, connective tissue, right, in terms of blood vessels. All right, muscle, in terms of cardiac muscle. All right, epithelial tissue, in terms of the lining of all the blood vessels. All right, and it's a muscle by itself. All right, and there's nervous tissue because nerves that innervate the heart itself. There's a collection of all four of those tissues that do a certain thing. The heart function of the heart is to pump blood throughout the body. All right? All four tissues come together to help decide or help in the overall function of the organ. Okay? And then you have organ systems. Groups of organs together to provide a certain function of the body. All right? And the human body, which we're talking about, has a collection of 11 different organ systems. All right? Most animals have a collection of several different types of organ systems, maybe not all 11. Okay? Depending on the organism we're talking about. Here are your organ systems. Digestive. Right? And you know these sort of intuitively. Digestive system, what does it do? Breaks down food that's taken in, right, and absorbs nutrients. Okay? And sort of this table, you should know this table for your exam on Friday. Right? The different organ systems and sort of the glands that are associated with them and what they do. Okay? So the circulatory system, cardiovascular, heart, it moves nutrients around in the body, right? So heart, blood vessels, right? All right, respiratory, lungs, trachea, and it's exchange of gases with the outside, oxygen, oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange. Immune and lymphatic system helps protect the body against pathogens, right? This includes the bone marrow, the lymph system, lymph nodes, spleen, etc. Right? The excretory or the urinary system in humans, kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, filters the blood and removes wastes. All right? The endocrine system helps with coordination and control of the body, circadian rhythms, hormone responses, and so on. Okay? The reproductive system produce gametes in order for reproduction. All right? The nervous system, coordination of body movements and control of body activities. Integumentary, which includes the skin and its derivatives, hair and nails, helps for protection. Okay? The skeletal system, bones, tendons, ligaments, cartilage, help to support and protect the body. And then you have the muscular system, which is important for locomotion and other movement. All right? So you have these 11 body systems that really work together to help you be who you are. All right? So you stand up in the morning, or you get up out of bed, you stand up, you walk to take a shower. That movement and support is the muscular and the skeletal system working together for you to move around. The fact that you're here looking at me, right? That's your brain and your endocrine system controlling the fact that you're awake, for the most part, okay, at this time and paying attention. All right? All of these systems are not mutually exclusive. They depend upon one another for inputs, information exchange, in order to keep the body at its normal sort of regulate or running normal operating conditions. Okay? Okay? So, this is where we get to tissues. Okay? Organs are broken down into specialized, complex tissue types. All right? If we break down an organ, if you take histology, when you get to be an upper or junior at some point, if you take histology, you'll look at different parts of organ systems and how tissues are arranged in order for an organ to do its function. Okay? So there are four major types of tissues in the body: epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. All right? And we're going to go through each of them. Okay? So here's sort of what they look like, examples. Easy. Nervous tissue. You can write this down right away. Nervous tissue does what? It sends responses through the body. It's meant for communication, right? So it actually relays electrical impulses. Okay? And so I filled out your little sheet like this. This is all I have on it. Okay? And that's sort of what you can expect to write down. All right, so the nervous system or the nervous tissue is composed of what? What types of cells? Neuron, right? Really, it's nervous tissue is neurons and all the types of cells that support neurons. Okay, there are about 6 types of cells that are important in supporting neurons. All right, but the main tissue, the main cell type is a neuron. Okay, and it sends electrical impulses. Where are neurons found? Brain and spinal cord. They're really found throughout the body, right? But the main organ that's involved with that, the brain and spinal cord. All right, so that's nervous tissue out of the way. Okay, the other easy one is muscle. Okay, what does muscle do? Movement. It contracts. All right, so it's a contractile movement, and there are 3 different types of muscle tissue. Okay, you have skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle. So I'm gonna all right, so we have cardiac, skeletal, and smooth muscle. All right? Cardiac muscle, where is it found? All right, heart. Now, what else can you say about cardiac muscle? All right, so it's involuntary, which means what?
It contracts on its own.
All right, contracts on its own. Okay, there are some other characteristics that we can use for cardiac or muscle in general. All right, we say it's found in the heart, it's involuntary. All right, we can talk about the structure of the cells. All right, in cardiac muscles, there are striations. All right, so this is a striated muscle in terms of the cardiac muscle. Okay, striated. And it has a unique characteristic in that, let's go up here. It is striated and it has connections, all right, between cells. Why is it important that a cardiac muscle have a connection between cells?
So the heartbeat is not like sporadic.
All right, the heartbeat's not sporadic. It actually allows electrical impulses to move through the cardiac muscle. All right, and this is important in the actual physiology of a heartbeat. Okay, so it's what we call it branched. All right, and we also have these things called intercalated discs that are present. Those intercalated discs are what then? You don't know. I just know they're there. Those are the connections between heart cells or heart muscle cells. Okay? So cardiac muscle, only found in the heart. It's involuntary, striated cells, right, that are branched and they have intercalated discs. Right? And one other thing, they all have one nucleus. So they're uninucleated. Okay? Skeletal muscle. Give me an example of skeletal muscle. Biceps, right? You know, as an example, right? Biceps, triceps, quad, pectoralis, abdominals, whatever. The diaphragm is a voluntary or is a skeletal muscle. Okay? What do you know about skeletal muscle? Is it involuntary or voluntary? All right, so voluntary. Okay? Skeletal muscle, if I go back to this picture right here, here's a picture of skeletal muscle. Right down here. Right? What is it? What do you see about that skeletal muscle? It's striated. Okay? It's striated. And it has it's multinucleated. All right, so we're going to say striated. It's multinucleated. Meaning it has more than one nucleus. All right, voluntary, and you know where they're found. Questions on skeletal muscle or cardiac muscle. All right, finally we come to smooth muscle. Where is smooth muscle found?
The stomach.
All right, so really they're found in what we call hollow organs. Okay, that includes the stomach, digestive system, the urinary system, in the ureters. It's found in blood vessels, lymphatic systems, the esophagus. It's pretty much everywhere. There's smooth muscle. Okay, but so we say hollow organs as an example because we don't want to say it's only in one system or another. All right, so hollow organs, involuntary or voluntary. So involuntary, it happens without any right? These are non-striated. Okay? They are uninucleated. And they have a certain structure. They're what's called spindle shaped. Right? And what that looks like is this. No, go back to blue. Sort of looks like this. And they form sheets. All right, so you end up with muscle cells that kind of look like that together. Okay? So one of those cells, let's say this one, right, is spindle shaped. Sort of thinner at the ends, a little thicker in the middle, right? They form sheets and allow for involuntary contraction. Questions on muscle tissue? No? Okay. The next tissue on there is connective tissue. And we're not going to get into all the different types of connective tissue. I just want to give you an idea about connective tissue in general. Okay? So, connective. Some important characteristics of connective tissue. All right? What all connective tissue includes is cells that are separated by an extracellular matrix. What is an extracellular matrix? What does extracellular mean? Mitch, what does extracellular mean? Well, it has to do with cells. What's extra? That's outside of the cell. All right? So something that's outside of the cell. And I'll talk to Jason and Rob here because they took my anatomy and physiology class and they should remember this. What's a matrix then? Sarah. Okay.
Fluid, like extracellular.
It's basically some type of substance, right? There's some type of protein substance that's on the outside of the cells. So you have cells that are separated by something, right? And that extracellular matrix can be solid. It can be gel-like or fluid. Okay? The purpose of connective tissue is really to support, insulate, protect, connect tissue. All right? So it will support, insulate, protect, and even connect tissues. Okay? So let's look at some examples. Give me an example of a connective tissue. Bone. What does bone do? Bones are meant for support and protection, right? Rib cage protects vital organs, supports the body, allows you to stand upright, etc. Movement. Okay? What else do you know about bone?
It attaches to the skeletal muscles.
All right, attachment for skeletal muscles for movement. Is it hard? Yes. That is an example of a connective tissue with a solid extracellular matrix. All right, so make sure we put that down. All right, now we'll go back to Jason and Rob again. Give me another example of a connective tissue.
Cartilage.
Cartilage.
Sorry. It's all good.
Cartilage, right? What does cartilage do?
Like a shock absorber.
Shock absorption. There are several different types of cartilage. You have cartilages between the disc and your back, right? That is different from the cartilage that's at the head, at the ends of long bone that allow for ease of movement of, say, your shoulder. Okay? There's cartilages that hold things together. Okay? So there's lots of different types of cartilage. The important part is that this is a gel-like matrix. Okay? Some examples: cartilage, you have articular, fibrocartilage, etc. Another type of connective tissue: tendons and ligaments. What do those do?
Muscle to bone.
Right, they connect muscle to bone or muscle to or bones to bone, right? They are, again, another gel-like matrix, a semi-solid. Okay? Other connective tissue, adipose tissue. What is that? All right, so that's fat, and that's meant for insulation and energy storage. Okay? Again, a gel-like, semi-solid extracellular matrix. Okay? And then finally we have blood. Blood is a connective tissue, okay, with a fluid extracellular matrix. Okay. One other characteristic of all connective tissue, they have some type of fiber. Fibers are associated with it. All right, whether it be collagen fibers, elastic fibers, all right, they're some type of fiber that makes up the tissue. All right, and even in the case of blood, when clotting occurs, that's when the fibers are evident, right? Because clotting is a property of the blood itself. Okay? Questions on connective tissue. All right, so we covered nervous, muscle, and connective. All right, then finally we have epithelial tissue. Okay, and what you see here, this is an epithelial tissue. It characterizes a couple different things about epithelial tissue. Okay, epithelial tissue is found on body coverings. They sort of cover body tissues that are exposed to the outside. Okay, so any tissue, any part of the body that is exposed to the outside or eventually has underlying tissues with an outer surface is covered by an epithelial tissue. Okay? So with that, they also have what's called polarity. Okay? They have one end is different than the other end. Okay? And what you see here is that this part right here, this cell, which is, we'll outline a cell like that, okay, like this. These cells have one surface that is attached to underlying tissue. Then they have another free or apical surface. Okay? So this cell is polarized. It has two distinct ends. It has an apical end, which is free to the outside, and then a basal surface, which is attached. Okay? That is a characteristic of epithelial tissue. Now this actually is a one layer of cells. Okay? Epithelial tissue comes in two different flavors. It could be one layer of cells, like you see here, or it could be multiple layers of cells. All right? If it's multiple layers of cells, we call that a stratified epithelial tissue. Okay? And if it's one layer of cells between the apical surface and the basal surface, it is a simple epithelial tissue. All right? So if we did epithelial tissue, right? It lines body surfaces. Okay, it's found throughout the body. Your skin is a prime example of epithelial tissue. Right? It is meant for protection. Okay? Think about your skin has multiple layers of cells. So it's a what type of epithelial tissue if it has multiple layers of cells? Stratified. Okay? So that multiple layers of cells help to protect the layers of cells and tissues underneath it. Okay? So skin, and we do simple versus stratified. Okay? And then the other thing is that about epithelial tissue is that it is named and classified based upon the cell shape. Okay? So, the shape of the cells. And it can come in three different shapes. All right? Cells can be flat, sort of square, or they could be rectangular. All right? If they're flat, that's called squamous epithelial tissue. And I'll draw that out in a second. If they're square, that's called what? Cuboidal. And then if they are rectangular, that's called columnar. Okay? What does that look like? So a squamous epithelial tissue looks like this, sort of flat in cells. All right? And so I'm drawing a couple different layers of cells. This would be a stratified squamous epithelial tissue. All right? Square cells are equal in height, or cuboidal, equal in height as they are in width. All right? Those are supposed to be circles for nuclei. All right? They look like dice. All right? And then finally you have columnar, which look like rectangles on one end, standing on one end. All right? So you have simple versus stratified, right, depending on the number of layers of cells that are present between the apical and the basal surface, right? And then they are so named based upon their shape, flat, square, or columnar, right? Squamous, cuboidal, or columnar. Questions on tissues? All right? That is a very superficial explanation of tissues. All right? We left quite a bit out, but it's enough that you now have an understanding of what they are. Okay? And that's sort of where I want you to be. This will also serve as a introduction for your human and A&P class next in the fall, next year. Questions up to there? So, the body does with these tissues and how the organ systems work together to keep things sort of normal in the body. All right? And we're going to sort of look at this in a couple different ways. All right? Animals can be classified as to whether or not they regulate their internal environment in response to the external environment, or if they conform to or adapt to their surroundings as opposed to their internal environment. All right? So an animal that is a regulator, right, uses internal mechanisms to control changes inside. Give me an example of a regulator. Humans, okay? You don't have very drastic changes in your body temperature, and we're going to use body temperature as a prime example, okay? You can walk outside today, it's 38, 35 degrees outside. You walk outside, your body temperature changed drastically, yes or no? No, okay? Because you regulate your body temperature. Now, if I take a lizard or a snake and I put him outside in the snow and I put him in a cage, he can't walk around, can't escape or go hiding somewhere, what's going to happen to his body temperature or that animal's body temperature? It's going to drop, okay? So you have a regulator such as humans and mammals, and you have conformers such as lizards and fish, right? Their body temperatures change according to or in correlation with the environment around them, okay? So a regulator versus a conformer. Example, river otter versus fish. They live in the same environment. River otters are mammal. It has to do something in turn to regulate their body temperature. Keep it at somewhere around 37 degrees. Okay? Whereby a fish, depending upon the temperature, right, body temperature versus ambient temperature, and the environment will adjust, will change. All right? So an animal may be a regulator for certain conditions and a conformer for others. Okay? It's not to say that if an animal is classified as a regulator, it is a regulator for everything. Okay? Okay? And then the example, just skip that over. What this is really the goal of this is maintaining what we call a homeostasis. And homeostasis is a relative constant internal environment. All right? Again, using body temperature as an example. 37 degrees Celsius for humans. Okay? That's sort of where we keep it, right? And we do things in order to maintain that constant. Even if you go outside and you're standing in the desert at 120 degrees in the sunlight, your body is going to do something physiologically to keep your body temperature at 37 degrees Celsius. Okay? Your body will try to adapt and maintain that temperature. All right? Other examples, blood pH, glucose concentration, right? They're all maintained, blood glucose concentration, they're all maintained at a relative constant level. All right? And then sort of regulation of room temperature by thermostat is a good. So let's see, here it is. See the room temperature here is set at about 20 degrees, 25 degrees Celsius. It gets too warm, right? That's a stimulus. So here's stimulus. Room temperature goes up. What the thermostat is a sensor, a control center, right? So there's a message that's sent to the control center that says it's too hot in here, shuts the heat off, turns the AC on. What happens to the temperature? It goes down. Okay? Here, this is called the effect or the effector. All right? The effect or the response counteracts the stimulus, works against the stimulus. This is an example of a negative feedback mechanism. Okay? And most homeostatic mechanisms work by a negative feedback mechanism. Okay? So let's talk about, instead of a thermostat, let's talk about body temperature in humans. Okay? You go outside, you go running around, all right? Or you go to, let's say you go to the wellness center, you get on the treadmill, you start running. What's going to happen to your body temperature? Your internal body temperature is going to go up. That's the stimulus. What's the control center? Your brain, right? Your brain's gonna. There's a part of your brain, the hypothalamus, that says that senses your internal body temperature. It's going to go up. What's the response going to be? Sweating, right? Right. Blood vessels dilate. You start to sweat. What's the reason for the sweating? To alleviate heat from the body into the environment, and you're eventually, once you stop exercising, your body temperature will go down. Okay? So the response, okay, counteracts the stimulus. That is a negative feedback mechanism, meant to keep the internal temperature at a relative constant level. Okay? Similar things happen for blood pH, glucose levels, etc. Okay? All right, so we have parts of a homeostatic mechanism. A set point, okay? 37 degrees Celsius in humans as 98.6 Fahrenheit as a set point. So you know it's going to go up or down, all right? Blood pH is about 7.4. That's its set point. Goes up, that's a stimulus. It goes too far down, that's a stimulus that initiates some type of response, all right? So you have to have a sensor, something in the body that senses changes in blood pH and temperature, all right, and then triggers a response. And usually in most homeostatic mechanisms, that is a negative feedback, meaning that the response counteracts, works against the stimulus. Okay? And you return to, all right? So, homeostasis then, where homeostatic mechanisms moderate but do not eliminate changes in the internal environment. All right, so they help to regulate them, but they might be off. All right. So then you have set points are usually stable for the most part. If we were to take an average of body temperatures across the class, it'd be somewhere around 98.6. Some are probably a little higher, some are probably a little lower. All right, but that's in internal differences. But there can be changes depending upon what it is. Now we've been talking about negative feedback mechanisms. There are instances where a positive feedback mechanism for homeostasis does occur. Okay? Positive feedback, if negative feedback, the response counteracts the stimulus, what is a positive feedback going to do? It's going to make the stimulus stronger. Okay? And there's only two instances that I know of in humans where a positive feedback mechanism occurs, and that's blood clotting and childbirth. Okay? So in childbirth, the stimulus is the pressure of the fetus on the cervix. Okay? Control center is the brain. The response is the release of oxytocin. Okay? Oxytocin causes uterine contractions. The uterus contracts and further pushes or puts pressure on the cervix because of the pushing the fetus on the cervix. So it increases the stimulus until there is a distinct endpoint. What's the endpoint in childbirth? The baby's born. There's no more pressure. Okay, the baby comes out. That's it. All done. Okay, positive feedback mechanisms have to have a definitive endpoint. Otherwise, it would just be a sort of an infinite loop continuing to make or enhance the stimulus on and on and on. Okay, and that could be. All right, we're going to look at thermal regulations, internal temperature. All right, basically difference between internal temperature. We talked about a conformer versus a regulator in terms of thermal regulation. Okay, so in the animal kingdom, we have endotherms versus ectotherms. An endothermic animal is one that generates its own heat by metabolism, such as birds and mammals, right? Would an endotherm be a regulator or a conformer?
Regulator.
regulated, all right? And then an ectothermic animal is an animal that gains heat from external sources, right? Most invertebrates, fishes, amphibians, and non-avian reptiles. And most, if not all, ectotherms are conformers because they have to regulate their temperature based upon their environment. Questions on that? We'll stop there. And then this is an example. Slide 28, all right, is an example, your homeostatic mechanism diagram, all right? Parts of it. Homeostasis being whatever set point there is. There's some type of stimulus, a change in the internal variable, whether it goes up above normal, down below normal, whatever it does. There's a receptor that senses that change, sends a message to the control center, usually the brain in the case of humans, right? And that initiates some type of response, right? And most of the time, that response is going to be a negative feedback and counteract the stimulus to maintain homeostasis. All right, for your exam, you should know tissues, homeostasis, homeostatic mechanisms, right? Those are the important parts of today's lecture. Austin.
Where are the different epithelial cells located? Like squamous, cuboidal,
So, cuboidal cells are found, simple cuboidal epithelial tissue are found in the urinary tract, in the kidneys, as an example. And simple columnar epithelial tissue is found lining the small intestine. Okay? There are some exceptions to those rules for some like weird instances of epithelial tissue that sort of don't fit in those categories, but we don't need to talk about those right now. And then for the most part, you will not find, there's very few instances where you'll find stratified cuboidal or stratified columnar epithelial tissue. Right? For the most part, they're just simple. Okay?
How much squamous is that skin?
So skin would be a stratified squamous epithelial tissue. All right? And then like the lining of blood vessels or the lining of the lungs would be a simple squamous epithelial tissue. And that's important for gas exchange, etc. Okay? Other questions? All right. We'll see you guys on Friday.